Okay, in this episode of Let's Chat Sales, we're talking about screwing up, making mistakes, but the upside of making a mistake in particular. And from a sales standpoint, it can be really advantageous if you do it right, if you make a mistake and then fix it. That's what we talk about today, so let's get into it. And of course, as always, like and subscribe. And here we go. Hey, Bob. And guess what? No, it's another episode of Let's Chat Sales. And this
Let's
time,
Chat Sales.
There we go. Let's have we get that. And we're going to talk about screwing up.
Well, this is going to be our longest episode ever.
I mentioned in our other podcast that's a whole, I could do a whole nother podcast series on that. Like what Brendan did, don't do the other thing.
Can we have women call in? Because that would really be
that would be priceless.
Yeah,
that would be priceless. I was thinking more in terms of sales. Not about
sales. Okay.
Stuff, but screwing up. No, but screwing up. I think we're proving in this conversation that it's inevitable. You're going to do it.
Yes.
I'm not perfect. There's some evidence that you're not perfect. We're going to cover screwing up because you're going to do it. And there's a silver lining to this.
Come on, there's no silver lining.
There is. There's a silver lining.
You got to put your tail between your legs and just pray that they don't realize you screwed up.
No, I think that's entirely the wrong strategy. I think the thing that you do is when you screw up and then you fix it, the relationship with your customer, we're not talking about, personal relationships, but relationships with the customers. If you screw up in some way and then you're able to fix it, the relationship is ultimately perhaps stronger. It's better. It's like a broken bone. You break your bone, and interestingly enough, where the bone heals, it tends to be stronger than the rest of the bone now, right? I don't know if you knew that. Science. It's science. We're going to lose.
No, I'm just in awe of the way you made this all work.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But here's the thing. You have to look at everything. What is it Shakespeare says? Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so, right? So an error, it's all on how you look at things. So you make a mistake. Okay, there's a mistake. It depends on what you did. If you kill somebody, all right, that's going to be tough. This show is not for you. I should have that in the what do you call it, in the disclaimer. This show is not for felons.
And there goes 2/3 of our audience.
But seriously, I have a number of instances where I've screwed up with a customer, and if I am responsive and adequately contrite and humble about it, they ultimately will come around. If you're genuinely sorry that it happened, or you're diligent about trying to fix it, and the customer can recognize that, not all the time, but most of the time, you end up having a stronger, better relationship with the customer. It's a learning experience. Most of the things I learn because I make a mistake the first time around, and then I see that, and then you don't make that mistake anymore. That's learning for me. And I suspect a lot of people are the same way. You're going to make mistakes, and so they're learning opportunities. But one of the things I've come to find is that if you then work to fix it, it can be truly beneficial for you as a salesperson, as a business person, as a human being.
What makes you human to your client, right? It shows your character. It's easy to say that we do great work. It's easy to say that we'll back you up, that we're going to be there 1,000%.
Yeah.
It's a different animal when you show up.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it deepens that relationship. It's like now you're tested under fire. And if you can be honest and open, it really does deepen that relationship, because what I see is often the other party will open up more about some of their issues.
Exactly.
I'm really bad at email. I'm really bad at checking my email. Could you do me a favor and text me instead?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on the positive side, or that, coming out and fixing something, being responsible, taking responsibility I think, is the right strategy, not only for the right reasons, and the alternative is trying to avoid it. It ultimately is going to, 90% of the time, scientifically speaking, it's going to backfire on you. And that is, it's going to work against you, trying to deny it, trying to avoid it, trying to pass the buck to somebody else. Those things generally don't pay off. They don't play very well. Right?
So you're not a fan of, there's a mistake and you just let go and hope they never see it.
Right.
When do you tell them? How far after you find out about it?
And this is a little bit like that last episode where when you respond to an email, you don't respond necessarily right away. It depends on the urgency of the situation and the severity. So you'd go through that in your head, or you go through that with other people, and you decide, how important is this? If it's a little tiny thing, you just tell them whenever. If it's a big thing, then the question becomes, what's the best way to tell them? What's the best way for them to hear it, right?
Right.
So you may not want to
spring. Who needs to hear it?
Who needs to hear it and when? What's the environment they need to hear that news in? I mean, you don't want to tell them necessarily, they only have 5 minutes to process it and they've got another call coming up, for example.
Right.
Right. So how do you set the stage to do that? How do you let them down easy? So let's walk through that. How would that look? You learn something. Oh, here's a mistake. You discover it. You might talk internally. Like, how are we going to deal with this? There, two heads are better than one. That's why I talk to you all the time about my stuff. Like, hey, it's good to bounce. Yeah, well, it is. It's good to bounce it off someone else. So it's always nice to have another perspective or two.
It's also important, Brendan, at that point to gather as much information as possible.
Right.
I have been guilty several times of finding out about a mistake internally in a very high, calling the client, and the client wants to talk in a granular level. And I'm not prepared to do that. And that can be worse than telling them you made a mistake, because now it's like, so you're telling me you made a mistake, Bob, but you don't even understand it.
That's kind of where I was going. You're thinking about what's the problem, what's the scope of the problem. And then the next thing is, how much of this problem can you solve for them? If you introduce the problem, then the onus is upon you to try and figure out a way to solve it. And if there are things you can immediately set into action to start to resolve it, that makes it easier for you to deliver the news to your customer. Again, every situation is going to be different. And so timing is a factor. How quickly do you have to tell them? Who do you tell? And so forth. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of preparation. What can you do ahead of time to, as soon as you discover it, how quickly can you put together a plan of action, both to tell them and also to reconcile? It may be one of those situations where we've got an engineer in place. We've started to brainstorm options. We've backed up data, whatever the things are that you can do. And we're doing this in parallel with telling you that we just discovered this 30 minutes ago, 2 hours ago. And this is what we have in mind. And so then the question becomes, how much preparation can you have in place? This is your point, right? When you get to them, like, we've thought this through. Here's what we think the issues are. Here's what we're doing. This is what we need from you. And then the other thing is, you got to give them, this is a personal opinion now, you have to give them the opportunity to get mad, to lash out.
Yep.
And you've got to take it.
Yep.
That's part of what salespeople get paid for, is getting beat on.
Yes.
It's part of the kind of a customer therapy program, right? You take the bullets so that engineering doesn't have to, so that product people don't have to, so that customer support people don't have to, because in theory, as a salesperson, as the founder, salesperson, you're getting paid for that. That's your job. And so you can't shirk that responsibility. You get the accolades probably more than you deserve, and you get the beatings and the criticism maybe more than you deserve.
I was going to say, I once had a client, and I got beaten up by them a lot. Yeah. Rightfully so. But when I left the company, the guy said, you're the only person I've ever dealt with in sales who just took his medicine. Yeah. You never argued. You never debated. You never got mad. You just let me burn out for like 5 minutes and I said, or 25 minutes. He said, and then it was over. Oh, no, that's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You got to give them the room and the opportunity to vent and to get angry and so forth, as long as it's not abusive and personal and so forth. And they may want to do it in front of other people. Yeah. So the way to diffuse that a little bit, and it depends on who you're across from, I find it helps that if you start in on it before they do. Yeah. If you go to them and say, hey, listen, I screwed up. You're going to be angry with me, and I'm going to lay it out. This is what I did, or this is what happened, or this is what we did. Right. And ultimately, I'm responsible, and I screwed up, and you ought to be mad, and I completely understand why you are. I'd rather you didn't throw anything at me, maybe introduce a little humor, but, it may not be appropriate, so you got to weigh that. Again, every situation is different, but if you can do something like that to diffuse it a little bit, that will take a little bit of the edge off, because they recognize that I'm going to get mad at this guy or gal, and it's unnecessary. Whereas arguing with them in that situation Arguing never helps.
Yeah.
And if it's a back and forth about, well, you didn't tell us this and you didn't tell us this, all it does is you run the risk of losing a client.
There will be times later on to argue the specifics. After the temperature has decreased and the intensity of everything has decreased because they've gotten some of the stuff off their chest, they've understood. Maybe you've even got a plan in place that will solve things well enough that they feel comfortable. Then, if there are some issues to be disputed, you pick those up at a later date when the temperature's lower. Another thing that's really nice about this is if you take that burden on, hey, it's my fault, then for them, they can go to someone else and say, hey, these guys screwed up. It wasn't me. It was somebody else. And you know what? That's why they hire consultants. That's why they hire outside people. So that the shit can roll downhill. I don't know if we can say that on Apple.
Now you have to put explicit. Nice. Great. Now we have to invite the felons back.
Felons can come back now. So you were going to say something.
What I was going to say, Brendan, is often these situations, these mistakes seem a lot worse in the first hours than in reality.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has come to me as I've gotten older is everything seems like a 5-alarm fire out of the gate. But when you start to look at it, it's more like, okay, trash can's burning. Right. We can deal with it. And I think that's a mindset that I have to constantly remind myself. Like, you know what? This looks really bad. They're going to fire me. And that, you know what? They're probably not. They probably expected this. And I think the calm influence I can have over a situation can often diffuse it.
You know, you do it a couple times, it does get easier. It does. You get used to it. It's like an old dog. They've seen it all.
You have a thicker skin.
Yeah, I've seen that one before. They don't get as riled up. So if it's your first one, just in the back of your head, say, well, I guess I got to get through a few of these.
That's it. Yep. So, well, this was great, Brendan. Can we do this again sometime?
I think, yeah.
Bye.
Okay, so it's another episode of Let's Chat Sales. That was an easy one, I think. And hopefully it was helpful. And I hope we didn't screw it up too much. So anyway, check this one out. And thanks for watching.